So today I'm going to map out what I would do if I'm just getting into DeFi, or maybe I'm already in DeFi, but perhaps my portfolio is not doing the best and I want to start to optimize my performance. I'm going to give you the exact blueprint that I used, so that way I don't have to spend as much time on my business, but rather I can have reliable passive income coming in every single month that allows me to pay my rent and pay my expenses. And the last thing I want to say before we get started is this does not just work for me. This works for hundreds of people that I've worked with in the past. Some of those include Zach Smith, now earning $180,000 a year in DeFi passive income. Thomas Nye replacing his income from his winery and restaurant with passive income. And Scott Eskridge funding his home build with DeFi income. And the cool thing about Scott, he's actually building his home with his hands. But we're not going to go ahead and dive in. So we're going to do this in a couple different phases. And phase one is basically going to be you only have crypto, you're not investing into DeFi. So basically, this is getting from first base to second base because we have crypto, no DeFi, and we need to get to a point where we have some DeFi. So that way we can start doing the other steps and we can start optimizing, start earning passive income, stuff like that. So if I have crypto and I have no DeFi, the first actions that I'm going to do right here is see what cryptos I have, right? And the reason why is because not all cryptos can be put into a liquidity pool. Not all cryptos can start to earn passive income. For example, there's XRP. We can't do this directly with XRP simply because there's not really any liquidity over on the XRP network. There's not much DeFi happening over there. Now we can do this with like a pegged version of XRP, but even then we are very, very limited. Whereas if we want to do this with Ethereum or Bitcoin, we are not limited whatsoever because there are so many liquidity pools for Ethereum, for Bitcoin on various different networks basically. So when you're looking at your cryptocurrency assets, what I want you to do is head over to CoinGecko and start to pull them up on CoinGecko. So for example, if I were to pull up Ethereum, well, I'm just going to spoil that one for you. There's plenty of liquidity pools for Ethereum. It's on the Ethereum network and it's also on a various amount of other networks. And it actually has its own network. So you're not going to really see any contract addresses or anything like that there. You will see that it's on the Etherscan Explorer, and that's because it's on the Ethereum chain. You could also see under the chains, Ethereum ecosystem. But what I want to show you is a token that's built on top of the Ethereum network. This time we'll do Link. So we pull up Link. You'll notice that there's a contract address right here. And we have a little Ethereum icon. We click the little three dots. It's also on all these other chains over here. So that tells us that, hey, this is a token not built on its own network, but built on other networks, which is completely fine. That's what we're looking for. You'll also notice on the Ethereum ecosystem. So that's how we determine what chains it's on. A couple chains that I want you to kind of focus on, if we just head over to Metrics Finance and go over to the Discover page, these right here are the chains that I want you to focus on. Ethereum, Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, Base. If we want to, we can do some BNB. I don't really recommend it just because the returns aren't as consistent over there. There's not as much action over there, especially in the United States, but also Solana. That one's a very, very important one. So these five and then Solana, right? Focus on those. If your assets are on those chains, and I highly recommend you write this down in a spreadsheet, notepad, whiteboard, something like that, then you can invest those assets in liquidity pools. The other thing is, if there's like pegged version of those assets, for example, if we were to go to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is only on the Bitcoin network, right? And you can't, put actual Bitcoin into liquidity pools. What you can do is you can go and invest into something like CBBTC, which is a derivative of Bitcoin, backed fully by Bitcoin. You can invest into Wrap Bitcoin, once again, derivative of Bitcoin, backed fully by Bitcoin, and you can bring those over on chain. So looking at wrapped versions as well. That's the next step. I'm just going to go ahead and jot this down. We want to check networks for the cryptocurrencies that we're investing into, kind of like what we just mapped out on CoinGecko. And the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is document our assets that we can put into liquidity pools. That way we have a general idea of what we want to invest into once we actually get into DeFi. So this is phase one, right? Now we're going to dive into phase two. Now again, phase one is to get you prepared for phase two. Phase two is to actually build out your DeFi portfolio, start to find different positions, and actually put things in place before deploying your capital. Now guys, if you are already investing into DeFi, I highly recommend that you continue to watch through phase two because you're most likely still going to learn something, right? And there are going to be optimizations from phase two that you're going to be able to implement into your portfolio, and you're going to be able to refine your overall strategy. On top of that, we're also going to get to optimizations and scaling your portfolio in this video. By the way, if you guys enjoy this style of content, let me know down below in the comment section, but also drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our future content, because my next video, I'm going to be revealing my exact portfolio, how I'm making roughly $5,000 $5 per month from it right now and how I'm paying all of my living expenses. So step one, search metrics with assets, right? Pretty simple. Now, I highly recommend that you segment these exchanges and networks. And what I mean by that is we don't want to just look at all exchanges at once. The reason why is because Orca and Radium numbers are going to be very, very different than what Uniswap on the Ethereum network and Arbitrum network look like right now. The reason why is because Solana is up 43% in the past 7 days. Ethereum is up 4% because of the recent launch of Trump coin over on the Solana network. So there's super high volumes over there. If we start to filter based on those high volumes, well, ultimately that's going to skew our numbers and hide results that would actually be good on the Ethereum network or on the Arbitrum network, Polygon network, Base network, stuff like that. What I recommend is you segment between these four, then you go over to Orca and Radium, and then you go over to Velodrome and Aerodrome, selecting these four, and then these two, and then these two, not all at once, but in separate segments, basically. So if we were to look at these ones for starters, basically, the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is filter by pool. Now, guys, if you need it, there's a 5-day free trial available on the Metrics Finance website, but filtering is going to be available to only pro users. But again, there's a 5-day trial if you just want to try this out. Now, that being said, under this filter section, what I'm going to do is go to this include section. I'm going to start to type in assets that I have. Now, fair warning, if you type in Ethereum, you will have 1,100 pools to sort through. So we don't type in Ethereum because on the majority of these networks, we are pairing assets with Ethereum. You'll notice that it's COD with Ethereum, Uni with Ethereum, Doge with Ethereum, Ethereum with USDC, right? So we don't really need to type in Ethereum because by default, we're already going to have a lot of Ethereum liquidity pools. What I want to type in are those other assets that you could pair with Ethereum, like Link. We have 16 pools for Link alone. Let's just say Render, Aether, GRT, say Aave as well. And we're just typing in the assets, separating them by commas that we actually hold, that we determined in that initial phase right over here where we documented the assets that could be used in liquidity pools. Right over here is what we're using, and we're searching metrics for those assets. Now, guys, we are just going to filter by assets. We're not going to go into any crazy filters on APR, TVL, or anything like that. And the simple reason why is because it's pretty easy to evaluate 45 different pools and determine which ones we might want to end up investing into. And you'll notice there's multiple linked to Ethereum liquidity pools. And while it seems very, very appealing to just select the one with the highest return, we want to select the one with the highest TVL that appears first, basically. The reason why is because later on, we'll run a little bit of a study that I like to call it, where we'll make sure that we're in the best pool, or we've selected the best pool that has the best return. But by looking at the one with the most TVL, we can see kind of what results are being provided on a consistent basis, and then we can start to optimize. So again, stuff like Ethereum to Link, I'm happy getting 61% APR on, but the truth is I'm going to get higher than 61% APR because this assumes a broad range of plus 25%, minus 25%. We're going to end up narrowing that down. Ethereum to Aave, 77% is pretty damn good as well. Ethereum to Render, 67%, also pretty damn good. Ethereum to Aether, 66%. Guys, these four pools that I just favorited are pools that I've either been in the past month or I'm currently in. Like I currently have $20,000 or so in Ethereum to Aether, and it's doing very, very well. Happy with the results. Again, stuff like GRT to Ethereum, we might not want to look at. That's down at 31%. But we start to filter by the assets first, and then later on, if we need to, we'll start to filter by other filters to discover new assets and discover pools that we might not normally deploy our capital into if we are just looking at assets that we already have. So going back to our board over here, step 2 is going to be to favorite assets on Metrics, right? Or I should say favorite pools on Metrics, because we're going to come back to these liquidity pools and start to simulate them. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole process, but ideally we're looking for ones that have good returns that we would actually be happy with. And then when we start to dive into them, we're going to start to evaluate what type of returns they could actually do and simulate them. So if I were to simulate this Ethereum to Aether position right over here, which is also going to be in phase 2, keep in mind, because we're trying to bridge the gap from having no DeFi portfolio to having a successful DeFi portfolio. Within this, there's obviously going to be like little sub phases, I guess you could call it. Like we have our DeFi formula roadmap, which goes from finding the different cryptocurrency assets for the portfolio to actually finding the positions for the portfolio, simulating the performance, and then actually deploying our capital, and then optimizing what we're currently doing and actually scaling upwards. That's what we do in our DeFi formula. Again, this is like a more broader overview of that. But we would set our deposit amount, say $10,000 or so. We would go and start to select a range. Usually I like to start with a 30-day high and 30-day low and then go from there. And you'll notice that we're almost at a range in this instance. So obviously we need to bring that max price up to something like, say, 65,000. We could even do 64,000, and then probably going to bring this min price up a little bit too to like 43,000 just so I could squeeze out some juice, maybe 44,000. Ideally, I'm trying to get an asset ratio that weights me more towards the asset that I'm bullish on. Like I think Aether is going to be a better performing asset, so I'm going to allocate 60% over there and 40% over to Ethereum. And then if I scroll down right over here, you'll look at volume history. You'll say this looks pretty consistent. We don't really need to do any adjustments to that. If we want to, we can only look at the past 14 days by adjusting that calculation range. That'll get us a little bit more of an accurate depiction. Now it shows we're doing 46%, which isn't that good. What I notice is right here, there's a ton of liquidity on these two current prices. Now, if the price were to go right to the left or the right of that, I'm now doing 71%. Over here, I'm doing 85%, right? So I have some buffer room, right? I just have to hope that there's going to be a little bit of volatility in here to knock it off these two prices right on this area. But overall, this seems like a pretty solid pool to invest into. We could save it to our portfolio. Ideally, we just want to find these pools, start to evaluate them. And then after that, we're going to start to actually deploy our capital and open up these positions. So that's phase 2. Phase 3 is going to be pretty simple. It's called optimizing your DeFi portfolio. So a couple things that I want to go ahead and mention, and this is where robust tracking systems come into play. Again, we use Metrics Finance for tracking, but you want to make sure that you are in the green right here. If you're in the red over here, that's fine. And the reason why is because assets are going to go down, they're going to go up. We all realize that if we're building on top of our already existing crypto portfolio, we're going to hold these assets either way. So we want to benchmark compared to if we were going to hold these assets, because that's where we pulled these assets from. If we're injecting new capital, perhaps we do want to look at this cash in, cash out number right here. But this number right here compares our performance to if we held our initial assets as opposed to investing in them liquidity pools. So this is saying, hey, you are profiting compared to if you held your assets, which is good. That means that you're doing better. Your strategy is working. Whereas a lot of the times I see people, they have a red number right here and they're actually losing compared to holding their initial assets to the point where it's better for them to just hold their initial assets. And that's where we need to start to optimize. So the first thing that we're going to do is get this number green. And then once we get it green, we're going to start to maximize it. How can we get it green? Well, number one is just pool selection. We need to select correlated pairs, which correlated pairs means cutting out the crypto to stable liquidity pools. Crypto to stable liquidity pools are great if you're just trying to make income and you're trying to mitigate some market risk because you have capped gains and you have lower losses basically. And because of that, you will have higher income because you do have cap gains, but at the same time, you won't really beat holding in the market a lot of the times. So correlated pairs like Desync is correlated to Ethereum. Ethereum is correlated to Render. Ethereum is correlated to Aether, right? Having these correlated pairs in the liquidity pool is very, very crucial. And ultimately, that's what's going to be the number one thing that's going to help you outweigh divergence loss. And that's going to be the number one thing that also helps you profit right over here because lower divergence loss, higher earnings means higher versus HODL right here. So again, correlated pairs, do those. Next thing that you need to do is simulate the potential performance before even investing. Like saying, hey, what if Aether can go up to, let's just say 8 cents? That's going to be plus 30%. We're going to have some divergence loss right here. How long is it going to take to cover that divergence loss? And basically mapping out how long it's going to take to cover any divergence loss in the liquidity pools beforehand, before we actually invest in the liquidity pool to make sure that it makes sense. For example, if we can jump 30% in 3 days, but then it's going to take 80 days to cover opportunity cost or divergence loss, it's not that good of a return, whereas it's going to take 9 days. That's a lot better. 9 days to outweigh 3 days. Yes, it's going to be a little bit longer, but we can assume that we're not going to jump as soon as we hop in the pool. So that's kind of optimizing the divergence loss. The next thing is maximizing this income, and that's going to kind of come into our scaling phase. But what I want to talk about before you get into that is actually building your portfolio flywheel. This is something that you need to do, and basically what a flywheel is saying, hey, we go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 1 again, right? Something that just consistently repeats itself. In this instance, this is a growing portfolio. So what I would determine on the portfolio flywheel is deploying capital. And then when you deploy capital, you earn income. And then when we earn income, if we end up compounding that income, right? Ultimately, that's going to allow us to deploy more capital, which is going to allow the portfolio to grow on its own. Now, in this instance, I'm not talking about just taking that income and compounding it. There's more advanced flywheels. We're not going to cover that in today's video. If you take a look at the power of compounding in DeFi right here, or how to build a DeFi flywheel in your portfolio, I would highly recommend you watch those because that's going to be very, very important and crucial for perfecting your compounding strategies. There's just too much information to dive into when it comes to flywheels, and we don't really have time in today's video because it's already probably over 10 minutes long. But after phase 3, we're going to move on into phase 4, which is actually scaling out that DeFi portfolio. So let's go ahead and jot this down, scaling our DeFi portfolio. And the first thing that we're going to do is maximize our income efficiency. Maximizing our income efficiency means making sure that this number right here, this APR, is the highest it can possibly be. How do we do that? Well, the first thing that we do is make sure that we're always in range, right? Make sure that we're in range 100% of the time right here. And that comes with rebalancing at the right times. That comes with just maybe having broader ranges. Do kind of like a little bit of an analysis, right? Oh, I'm out of range 80% of the time doing 100% APR. That means effectively I do 80% APR. Whereas, oh, I'm actually in range 100% of the time doing 90% APR. 90 is higher than 80, so do the one with 90% APR. Simple as that. So maximizing our income efficiency means making sure that we're in range 100% of the time. It also means just making sure that we're in the best pool possible, which we can do by looking over here on Discover, say Aether to Ethereum, right? And we just, in this case, select all exchanges and networks, right? There's Ethereum to Aether right here. There's Ethereum to Aether right here and Ethereum to Aether right here. By making sure that we are in the best possible pool right here, we can make sure that we're earning the highest possible income. For example, this one's showing 155% versus over here, the one that I'm currently in, 66%. I'm also about to go out of range on my Ethereum to Aether, which means it's time to make sure that I'm adjusting my position. So I'm going to be looking for different Aether positions to maximize my income. Next thing we do, we maximize our growth potential. How can we make sure that we have the most market exposure possible? Make sure that we are beating divergence loss and having that highest versus HODL number possible. And what that means is if we were to dive into, say, tracking, we have $36.88 in total earnings, and then we have $2,800 profit versus HODL. If we do the math on this, this means we have basically a 76% profit margin on our yield. How can we get that up to 85%? How can we get that up to 90%, right? Hey, how can we get that up to 100%, right? Obviously 100% is a little unrealistic, but I have seen numbers in my personal portfolio and other people that I've worked with above 90%. But at the same exact time, how can we make sure that we're in assets that have a ton of growth potential, that are revenue driven, that are almost guaranteed to go up basically? So we want to maximize our market exposure. And then after we maximize our market exposure, we want to make sure that we are maximizing our growth potential, which is essentially saying that we're in 5 to 10x assets as opposed to 3 to 5x assets basically, while taking a similar amount of risk, which brings me to my next point. How can we minimize this time our risk, right? How can we minimize the actual downside risk that we have in the market? How can we minimize the smart contract risk that we have? How can we make things simpler basically so that way we don't really have just overall management risk on our part? Minimizing our risk. And that's also stuff that we need to dive into. So this is kind of my 4-phase plan from going from just holding cryptocurrency to building a DeFi portfolio to optimizing that DeFi portfolio to scaling that DeFi portfolio. Again, there's probably not going to be enough information in this exact video to go start to finish. You're going to need to watch some of the other videos on my page or potentially even work with us directly if you want to on building out that DeFi portfolio. But if you have the pieces on what to do in each phase, which I have posted on my channel before and I'm going to be diving into in my next video, then using something like this, a roadmap like this, is going to help you get from A to Z. Again, make sure to subscribe, drop a like so you don't miss out on my next video. I'm going to be talking about how I'm making over $5,000 per month from my DeFi portfolio right now. I'm super excited to talk about it. Again, I typically do these videos like once a month where I just dive into my overall performance, talk about what I'm currently doing. So definitely stay tuned for that. With that being said, that concludes this video. I will see you guys in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.